For Charles, Paris holds a deeply personal significance, intertwined with moments of both drama and tragedy. It was in this city that the abdication crisis, a pivotal moment in British royal history, reached its sorrowful conclusion. Furthermore, Paris is also where he had to confront the heartbreaking task of collecting the body of Diana, the mother of his two sons. The British royal family has maintained a long-standing affection for France, dating back to Queen Victoria's groundbreaking visit in 1855. However, few members of the royal family have forged such a profound emotional connection with the capital city of France as King Charles. His upcoming state visit to Paris, originally scheduled for September 20, further underscores his personal ties to this city. For Charles, Paris symbolizes the backdrop of dramatic and, in their own ways, tragic episodes. It was in a mansion within the Bois de Boulogne that the abdication crisis reached its melancholic climax. Additionally, the untimely demise of Diana, the mother of his children, occurred in the city in August 1997. Charles' adult visits to France commenced in 1970 when he attended a memorial service for Charles de Gaulle. De Gaulle, a significant figure in French history, had a complex relationship with the British, appreciating their wartime solidarity but remaining determined to keep the United Kingdom out of the European project. The memorial service held just before Charles' 22nd birthday emphasized his role as a representative of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. Approximately 18 months later, he accompanied the Queen and Prince Philip on an official state visit to France. This visit also afforded them the opportunity to make a personal visit to the Duke and Duchess of Windsor at their residence on the outskirts of the Bois de Boulogne. Although this visit was not an official part of the state visit's agenda, it held diplomatic significance. The Queen's biographer, Ben Pimlott, described it as a diplomatic rather than personal gesture of forgiveness, widely publicized at the time. By this point, the Duke of Windsor was battling terminal cancer, and it remains uncertain whether anyone besides the Queen, his niece, visited him during this period. Charles had already met the Duke during a private visit the previous autumn, likely driven by curiosity to meet the man who had been blamed by much of his family for endangering the monarchy through his abdication in 1936 to Mary Wallis Simpson. The Queen Mother, in particular, harbored deep resentment toward the Duke, holding him responsible for the early death of her husband, King George VI, who assumed the throne in his place. In the fall of 1971, Charles made a private visit to Paris, facilitated by the British ambassador to France, Sir Christopher Soames. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor were living in opulent surroundings at the time. Charles observed that they were surrounded by sycophants, with servants wearing uniforms similar to those at Buckingham Palace. Notably, his great-uncle David prominently displayed a government red box monogrammed with "The King." Charles later recounted this visit to his official biographer, Jonathan Dimbleby, emphasizing the Duke's self-pity and resentment. During their conversation, Charles even broached the idea of the Duke returning to England for the final years of his life, but the Duke hesitated, suggesting he would need Wallis's approval for such a move. In Charles's account, the entire encounter seemed tragic, from the existence of his great-uncle and his circumstances to the people and the overall atmosphere. He admitted feeling relieved to depart after just 45 minutes, choosing to drive around Paris by night, leaving behind the weight of history and family strife that Paris held for him. In mid-May 1972, Prince Charles accompanied his parents to visit the Duke, whose health had deteriorated significantly by that time, rendering him almost unable to speak. This meeting was brief, and Charles had seen little of his uncle since the abdication. The Duke passed away 10 days later, and his body was brought back to Britain for his funeral and burial at Frogmore. The young Prince of Wales would later reflect on the plight of Edward VI, who had to renounce the throne due to his love for a divorced woman. Fortunately for Charles, his own situation would have a happier outcome. Charles had always felt uncomfortable at the Duke and Duchess's residence in Paris, a feeling that would prove to be ominously prophetic in the years to come. This house, located at 4 Route du Champ d'Entraînement on the outskirts of the Bois de Boulogne in the Chic 16th arrondissement of Paris, had been leased to the Duke and Duchess of Windsor by the City of Paris from 1952 to 1986. After the Duchess's passing, the property was leased to the late Mohammed Fayed, a businessman and owner of Harrods, who renamed it Villa Windsor. In the summer of 1997, Fayed invited Diana, Princess of Wales, who was divorced from Prince Charles by then, to spend part of her holidays with his family in the south of France. This visit generated global attention, especially due to photos of Diana with Fayed's son Dodi. On Saturday, August 30, Dodi had the opportunity to show Diana the Al Fayed's Parisian treasures, including the Ritz Hotel and Villa Windsor. They stopped by Villa Windsor as they arrived in Paris from Le Bourget Airport. Initially planning to dine at a fashionable restaurant in Paris, they changed their minds and opted for dinner at the Ritz. However, instead of staying the night at the hotel, they made the fateful decision to leave by car, driven by Henry Paul, to an apartment owned by Dodi on the other side of Paris. The tragic car accident occurred in the Pont d'El Alma tunnel. Diana and her bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, who was the only passenger wearing a seatbelt, survived the crash. Unfortunately, Diana was declared dead by 4 a.m. At the time of the accident, Prince Charles was at Balmoral with the rest of the royal family, including his sons, William and Harry, when they received the devastating news. The Prince of Wales, along with Diana's sisters Lady Jane Fellows and Lady Sarah McCorquodale, former girlfriend of Charles before Diana, flew from Aberdeen to Paris. Also on their way to Paris were Paul Burrell, Diana's butler, and Colin Tebbit, Diana's driver and protector. It was evident that the tensions between Diana's camp and the royal family, which had marred her final years, would persist even after her passing. Colin Tebbit emphasized their commitment to caring for Diana, stating, "There was no question of leaving Diana's recovery to the establishment, as far as we were concerned. She had nothing to do with Buckingham Palace anymore or the Prince of Wales. She was our boss, and we would continue to look after her." While Burrell and Tebbit caught a 7:30 a.m. flight from Heathrow, which was filled with journalists covering the princess's death, the Prince of Wales's party would arrive several hours later. At the hospital, Diana was not placed in the mortuary but in a private room. Father Yves Marie Clotilde Bossuet, the Roman Catholic chaplain of the hospital, stayed with her for 10 hours, offering prayers by her bedside. Bernadette Chirac, the wife of the French President Jacques Chirac, also joined in prayer with Father Clotilde Bossuet for some time. Several other notable individuals visited the hospital during this time, including the French Interior Minister, Jean-Pierre Chevènement, the French Prime Minister Lionel Jospin, the British Ambassador Sir Michael Jay, and the Consul General Keith Moss. They were all waiting to greet the Prince of Wales and his party. When Prince Charles arrived with Diana's grieving sisters, the undertakers had already attended to the princess's body. Paul Burrell had arranged her hair, and French undertakers had carried out the embalming process. Diana had been changed into a black woolen dress provided by Madame Chirac. As Charles and Diana's sisters entered the room, a photograph of William and Harry, found in her handbag, along with a rosary given to her by Mother Teresa of Calcutta, had been placed in her hands. The Anglican archdeacon of France, Martin Draper, had joined Father Clotilde Bossuet in the room, and he led prayers said before Diana's body with the Prince of Wales and her sisters present. During their journey to Paris, Lady Sarah had inquired with Charles about the transportation of the coffin once it arrived in the UK. Charles made it clear that Diana would not be transported in a carriage drawn by horses, referencing Fayed's Harrods store. However, upon landing in London, Diana's body was taken to the Hammersmith and Fulham mortuary for a post-mortem examination. The prince flew back to Balmoral to be with their grieving sons. It would be another 6 years before Charles ventured to Paris again, and the first time Camilla joined him was 3 years after their 2005 marriage, when they were entertained to dinner by President Nicolas Sarkozy and his third wife, Carla Bruni. In 2015, Charles had a much happier trip to France when he attended the 21st UN Conference on Climate Change. He gave an opening address alongside the UN climate chief, Christiana Figers, and French Foreign Minister, Laurent Fabius, which indicated that he was taken seriously as a world figure. The French Institute of Science and Arts even awarded him the François Rabelais Prize for his support of organic farming. During his speech, he praised French cheese and expressed concern about the threat to its many varieties from genetically modified products. The prince emphasized the importance of traditional European craftsmanship and the unique flavors of products like Brie de Meaux, Crottin de Chavignol, and Bleu d'Auvergne. He stated that a significant part of European civilization rests on the inherited genius and craftsmanship of those who produce such distinguished culinary creations. A highlight of the state visit on September 20 will be the King's address to the National Assembly, marking the first time a British monarch has done so. However, Charles may also be looking forward to the state banquet and the selection of great cheeses, which he holds in high regard. Dear friend, if you like everything new about the royal family and don't want to miss all the novelties, subscribe to our channel and like it. By doing so, you take part in our development. We work for you.